630 CHED presents The Announcers. Opinion, personality, passion. The Announcers on 630 CHED, Edmonton's breaking news and conversation station.
Thanks for joining us on this week's edition of The Announcers. As per usual, I'm joined by co-host on the 630 CHED Afternoon News, Andrew Gross. Welcome back from Las Vegas.
Well, thank you very much. I'm glad that I was able to afford to come back from Las Vegas.
Yeah, I can't wait to hear about the trip. And making her debut on The Announcers, our colleague who runs the midday show on Kiss and Country 103.9, Steph Hansen. Welcome.
Oh, thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
It's good to see you. Have you ever been to Vegas? Are you a big Vegas gal?
I've been to Vegas once, but I'm not a gambler, so... Yeah.
Were you gambling?
Oh, yeah.
Is that a personal question?
No, not at all. I'm a gambler, but not by Webster's definition. I play the slots.
That
$20 at a time.
That doesn't qualify as gambling?
Well, I don't think so. Not when you see the guys who are laying down hundreds of dollars on the single roll of a dice or a cut of a card. I don't even go near that part of
See,
the
I
casino.
think it would be easier to walk away from the high limit tables. You know, you put down 100, you lose it, that's it, I'm gone. If I've been sitting there plugging a slot machine for ages, how do you plug your last coin? I mean, you know what I mean? Because the next one...
Well, you don't plug the coin. That's the thing. You put whatever you're going to start with in.
Oh, and then you just keep...
And then you just keep going. Yeah.
Pulling on it.
This is really, that's very 80s, just, you know.
Is it 80s?
It's all buttons.
I'm doing the, like, choo-choo
Yeah,
thing
I mean,
right
it's
now,
still there just for folks like you that want to pull that handle.
I would want to, but you don't have to.
You don't even have to.
You can just hit the button.
Yeah, basically. Or you can just drop it on the casino floor and go out to supper. The loss will be about the same.
That's right. Well, welcome back.
Well, thank you.
It's Seniors Week, and I know that on both of our shows on 630 CHED, Andrew, and Steph, I don't know if you've talked about this yet on Kissin', but we've been talking just about issues facing seniors, and the more you talk about it, the more you realize there are issues to talk about, issues that need to be addressed. Do you have a senior in your life?
Yeah, both my grandmas, actually. One is 85, one is 86.
Oh.
Yeah, so one actually just moved into an assisted living place in Calgary, and she loves it there, and that's all good. But my 86-year-old grandmother she's not ready to move out of her house yet, and she could probably use a little more assistance now in her life, but she's not ready.
Was it difficult for your 85-year-old grandmother to move into the assisted living facility? You say she loves it, but for a lot of seniors, this is one of the biggest transitions they'll make in their entire life.
Yeah, it seemed to go okay. I mean, she'd been living in the same house in Calgary for a number of years. My dad and my uncles all grew up in that house, and her next door neighbor had been her next door neighbor for I don't know how many decades. So they actually moved into this home at the same time. So I think that kind of eased it for both of them, because they're best friends and they moved at the same time, so they still remained neighbors when they moved. So I think that kind of eased the blow.
When we talk about Seniors Week, does one person in your personal life immediately come to mind? Is there a senior that plays a pretty significant role in your daily life?
Well, my mom's 92 and lives by herself in an apartment in Ottawa.
Wow.
Same
Amazing.
apartment she lived in with my dad, and has lived there for probably more than 20 years. Still a 4-bedroom apartment, a full kitchen, balcony, that kind of thing. We did approach her at one point to ask if she would like to maybe get out of that apartment, and we would set her up somewhere else, and she was having no part of it, which is funny because I honestly, no joke intended, cannot wait for the opportunity to go to some kind of assisted living center.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely. Are you kidding me? If the meals were prepared, the internet works, I'm good.
Good to go. I guess
Yeah.
the meals. I'm a terrible cook, so that would
Me as well.
definitely be an upside.
But my wife is 10 years younger than me, so I suspect I'm never going to go to one of those centers because she won't be ready to go by the time I'm probably dead. So,
She might be ready for you to go.
oh yeah, she's been ready for me to go for decades.
I had a chance to talk to Pat Spadafora this week, and Pat is the director of the Sheridan Center for Elder Research, and she was one of the lead researchers and one of the lead authors on a report, a Rivera report on ageism titled Independence and Choice as We Age. And of course, a lot of people have been paying attention to it, extra special attention to it, and the release date is no accident, seeing as Seniors Week is being observed across the country. And some really interesting numbers from Canadians of all age groups who chimed in. But in particular, when they talked to respondents aged 77 or older, more than half of them say that they feel that young people automatically assume that the elderly can't do things for themselves. And more than 25% of them, more than a quarter of them, say that only because of their age, younger people, including family members, make choices for them without even asking for their preference
Really?
or their input. More than 25% of them.
That's interesting. And I don't know what would make you more independent as a senior than not. But as I say, we tried to talk my mother into moving. She was having no part of it. And she became my mother again pretty quickly. Just, I'll let you kids know when I need you to make decisions for me. So
Yeah.
at 92, she still doesn't feel that that's necessary. But she's a very pragmatic woman who's a war bride, and she's still doing things the exact same way she did when she got off the boat in Halifax, how many ever years ago that was. She still buys only meat that has a bone so that she can use the bone to boil it and put OXO cubes in and make soup, and she still makes extra food. She does her own cooking, cleaning, but she's just very independent.
Does she drive?
She does not. She finally gave that up a little while ago, probably, well, actually more like maybe 5 or 6 years ago.
Her decision?
Her decision, she had the same car, Buick LeSabre, that she'd had for probably 30 years.
Wow.
Still in immaculate condition. We always kidded that if she were a mechanic, that car would last forever because everything non-mechanical was perfect. She had kept it clean, organized, seats never had a stain on them, that kind of thing. But one day she just decided, particularly in Ottawa, it's a big city, that she just wasn't equipped to handle the traffic anymore. So she sold the car to my brother.
Yeah, it's, you talk about recurring themes on Seniors Week, recurring themes for elder advocates in general, and independence is independence and respect are almost at the core, it seems, of every issue. And experts have pointed out, including in this report that we referenced, that when seniors are not allowed to exercise their independence or to celebrate their independence because of what many will say is ageist behavior, think of racist or sexist, we're talking ageism now, they become more reliant on our help. And so it becomes a chicken and the egg or a horse in the cart argument. What comes first? Is it a senior's reliance on others that leads to a loss of independence, or is it a loss of independence that leads to reliance on others? And when you touch on the driver's license issue, I think most people can connect with it because it's either impacted someone's family, their parent, their grandparent, whatever the case may be, or people realize how important their own mobility is, their own independence, their own driver's license. And we can all relate to what it would be like when, especially in circumstances outside of your control, your driver's license was taken away from you.
That's interesting because, thinking that through, I think, and I'm going to say something that people won't agree with, but or many won't agree with. I think perhaps the difference is that my dad, who's long gone now, but of course he was a Second World War major. He was a very old school guy. He completely invested and prepared for my mother's ultimate retirement and being alone. So all the financial issues were taken care of by my dad with pensions, investments. He secured that apartment that she's in. He arranged for money to be set aside for her to take taxis. And, he sort of laid it all out for her, and she's still living with that plan, and it's working brilliantly. So she doesn't feel as though she's lost anything. And what I think people won't agree with is that things have changed now where, both men and women don't plan for the most part for their retirement, and then find their number one concern when they do retire is that they don't have the financial resources to be independent. Number two, they don't know what to do with their retirement. It's the time. What do you do with all that time? And your children are older and they've got their own families and they're doing their own thing. And now without a driver's license, for example, you just feel isolated. And but again, my dad made it clear to all of us that we were to stay in contact with my mother, and I call her every 2 days. I have for my entire life because my dad told me to. And at this point, I'm 57. I'm a senior by definition of a lot of restaurants. I still call my mom every 2 days and make sure she's doing okay. And if she doesn't answer the phone, I call my brother to go over and see how my mom's doing. But planning has changed now. And I think if you ask most people in their 20s or 30s, what plans do you have in place for your retirement, not only financially, but what are you going to do with that time in your retirement? On day one, what's your plan? Most don't have a plan.
Well,
I think that's the difference.
Like, Steph, do you have your 65th birthday envisioned as the last day you'll work? I mean, how do you, I mean, I know that, we're all at different points in our journeys, et cetera, but I mean, do you see yourself as being one that's like just working out that plot of time and then you'll retire at 65?
I don't think so. I mean, being in radio too, most radio announcers just have a huge passion for it and they want to keep going forever and ever and ever. So I don't have a retirement plan per se in that regard. It's not going to be 65, I'm done. Maybe it'll be 75. Maybe they'll can me when I'm 50. Who knows? But, I don't see myself retiring at 65 from radio, but financially speaking, I've been putting away for years for retirement already. So I think I'll be set there when the day comes.
Yeah, it was a wake up call for me in my early 20s when people were like, if you haven't started already with RSPs and thinking about your retirement, you're already behind the curve, and you kind of go, oh, geez, I better get going on this. But I mean, you look at trends now. I mean, even people that are seniors right now, the 65 plus crew, and people are working well beyond 65. Some people, because they found jobs that fulfill them and jobs that challenge them, and some people, like you alluded to, Andrew, can't imagine what they would possibly do with 60 or 70 or 80 available hours a week. And other people, of course, there's the financial necessity. For a lot of people, the cost of living has gone up. They don't believe that their old age pension or any financial preparations that they've made or put in place are going to keep up with inflation and a rising cost in living. There are a whole lot of different reasons, but the age of retirement is perceived, I think, very differently present day.
Yeah.
And also you look at a strain on the workforce. We talk about all these phrases, and this was interesting to get into with Pat Spadafora. And if people want to hear the interview, it's at 630ched.com. She talks about, phrases that we use sometimes even subconsciously when we talk about our aging population, or she talked about the silver tsunami, and we talk about how society will answer, shortfalls in available staff, skilled workers in the workforce, in people contributing with tax revenue to pay for old age security, old age pensions, things like that. And I think we're having to get to a point where we have a conversation around maintaining legitimate areas within the workforce where seniors can not only contribute, but feel as though they're contributing and not sort of like the token senior, if you will.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And, the other thing, too, though, when I hear younger people, now I just became that guy with a shotgun on the porch, but when I hear younger people
Get
talking
off
about...
my grass!
You kids. They talk about, say younger people not able to get jobs because seniors are taking the jobs. And, McDonald's, for example, or any fast food place, they have a push for hiring seniors. They find them to be more reliable.
The
Walmart
kind of greeters.
Exactly, that kind of thing. But what I would point out to those young people is that a lot of the seniors that they're talking about would have retired and probably would not be working now if their kids would just get out of the damn house. Because it used to be, I got out of my house at 18. All my children are older than 18. 2 of them still live with me, and I suspect they'll live with me for quite some time. Mm-hmm. So it's a cycle that keeps going and going and going. My children can't find jobs and can't therefore support themselves on their own, so they stay with me. That increases my need to continue working, which then cycles around again because now you got a 57-year-old guy on the radio and there's probably a 21-year-old guy that would love to have my job. But I at this point, until I get my kids out of the house, established in careers with houses, how am I going to retire? I can't retire. And not because if I could, I could probably afford to take care of myself on a very part-time basis, but I can't afford to continue supporting a family without a full-time job. So it is a cycle. It just keeps going around and around and again. At what age did you move out of the house?
Well, I first moved out of the house when I was 18. And I went
Moved
to Europe.
back?
The first time.
I went to Europe for a year and I studied over there, and then I traveled, and then I moved to Vancouver. I went to university, and then I was trying to find work and I couldn't, and I moved from Vancouver back to Calgary and decided to temporarily move back in with my parents. And ended up through, it's a long story, but ended up deciding that I wanted to return back to school and further my education. And I think it's a good thing that I did. But I ended up moving back into the house at 23, not intending to stay for a while, but then it made perfect sense. My parents, there was a walkout basement, my own entry into the house. They were wonderful. We kind of and they said, listen, when you're going back to school, you can pay for the cost of your school, but what we will do is give you the room and board. We'll allow you to live with us.
Sure.
I'm not an idiot. So I decided to stay with my parents. That was a good deal. It was actually kind of a lot of fun. I had lived away from home for more than 5 years, and it was kind of a reconnection. But I mean, different people have different stories. I was very aware that by the time I was 25 and wrapping up my time at SAIT, I was like, it's probably time to get the ball rolling, but I was eager to. My parents never kicked us out or said on your 18th birthday, you're out of here. But at the same time, you do sort of have those conversations, sometimes even just jokingly about, you're supporting me now only because, let's be honest, let's address the elephant in the room. You're all going to be expecting us to support you in your old age.
Well,
and we'd
I'm
all
hoping,
have a
yeah.
good laugh. Yeah, that's what parents can expect.
Fingers crossed.
A lot of people that were tuned into our conversation on ageism, those contributing on the text line at 630 CHED, were referencing how they believe that relationships, intergenerational relationships, have broken apart, haven't sort of maintained the congruence that we see in other cultures, like Asian cultures and African cultures, where families live together. The grandparents live with the family, and there's a little more. One caller, Richard, was in touch with the show and said even in Canada's First Nations, there's that the respect for the elders, and he talked about how suicide rates are lower with
As
the
you get older, that's right.
population. The younger population has higher suicide rates. Do you have a strong relationship with your two grandmothers? Are you in regular contact with them?
Sort of. I guess I'm not really that great at calling people back sometimes.
Are you feeling guilty right now, Steph?
I kind of am. But no, I mean, I talk to my one grandma on the phone occasionally. It was actually her birthday a couple weeks ago. And she's a busy lady. I never actually got to talk to her because she called me back the next day. And then I called her back the next day after that. And then my other grandma, who lives in the assisted living place now, she has email. So we'll email back and forth sometimes too. And kind of talk that way. But I mean, my grandmas are busy people, and so am I. And yeah, it's just hard to connect sometimes. But I'm living in two different cities too, of course.
For sure. I think I would really encourage you to make that effort. Because you'll have some of the craziest conversations. My 92-year-old mother, you can ask her anything. They don't have the same inhibitions at 92 that they had perhaps at 42. They've seen it all. They've done it all. They have no apologies to make.
Yeah.
You can I could phone my mother right now. Let's not.
Andrew, we have a surprise for you on line one.
And ask her, what's a healthy number of times to have sex a week, for example? And she'd be like, well, let me tell you. She's had nothing but time on her hands to think, 92 years to put together all her theories, and she'll gladly tell you. And then she'll tell you what's wrong with kids today. And there's part of you that, I just find it so entertaining personally, but there's part of you that wants to say, well, that's just old thinking or whatever. But a lot of times there's just a wealth of truth to what the older people say.
Of course.
Everything it seems so simple or simpler for them because they made it simple. And we've made everything so complicated now. And when I've had an issue with somebody else and I've told my mom about it, and I've suggested that maybe the way to resolve this is I'll put together a letter and I'll go talk to this person and she'll go, why don't you phone them? Say you're sorry. Yeah, well, I guess that would work too.
Yeah, sure. That would probably solve it in 5 seconds.
Okay.
But I mean, I held my grandparents and hold them. I mean, they've since left us, but I held my grandparents in such high regard that I feel like I always wanted to. And this is where I think my desire to host a talk radio show first was born as well. So the family traditions around the lunch table or the dinner table, and sitting as a 10-year-old and trying to keep up with the conversation, and always wanting to hear about. My grandpa taught me. The one was in the Air Force in World War II. The other went to the University of Alberta, graduated and stayed at home to work as an engineer in Vegreville and Black Diamond and Tabor, and talked about how he was an essential service, and so he wasn't, in the Canadian military. And we'd have all these conversations about these important things in industry, and my grandpa explaining to me why, as a Chevron engineer, or the grandson of a Chevron engineer, I couldn't possibly, in good conscience, buy gas at Petro-Canada, and how Pierre Trudeau had ruined we had all these wonderful conversations.
Yeah.
But like, I want to ask my grandpa Rudy, who we named our son Wyatt Rudy after. He was a provincial champion hockey player. He was a football quarterback. Like, I want to ask him if he ever got in a bar fight. I want to ask him. I've seen pictures of him smoking cigarettes when everybody thought it was healthy, and I want to ask my grandpa Rudy how he quit smoking cigarettes.
Yeah.
I want to have these kind of real conversations that I never had. And you look back and you go, I spent so much time as a kid trying to impress my grandparents with these highbrow conversations, my attempt to keep up. And right now, I would give anything to just have a beer with one of them.
Do you know what? Ask an elderly person if they're scared of dying. Because all the conversations that you've just suggested are great and would be entertaining and informational, but it's really for your sake. But ask an elderly person if they're scared of dying or what they've thought about or what they think if they've accomplished in their life or whatever. It's a more difficult conversation, but I'll tell you what, for the reasons I mentioned earlier, there's no restraint put on older people. They in many cases are waiting for somebody to ask them a question like that because they don't feel like they can just bring up that conversation. I've had that particular conversation with my father-in-law, who's gone now, but an older gentleman at the time. It was so fascinating and honestly rewarding for me as well, because he wasn't scared like you are in your 30s and 40s and what's going to happen he wasn't scared. He wasn't welcoming it either, but it was just a really interesting conversation. It brought us a whole lot closer. It just felt like a much better conversation than, well, what were girls like in your day? Something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that is interesting because, sometimes I just wonder, like, what if I get hit by a bus tomorrow
Right.
and that's it? Like, what? And then you kind of talk to my grandma. I've never asked her that question directly, but she'll always say she's lived longer than she thought she would. And she's like, ho hum, when it's time, it's time.
Yeah. We got a
She's so
message
relaxed
from
about
Helen in Wetaskiwin. She was listening into our conversation earlier this week, and she said, what's very important for the younger generations to realize is that they too will become that older generation. And Helen made a great point, although people would say it's far from profound. At the same time, it's probably something that we don't always think about. I mean, do you picture yourself as a senior as we talk about Seniors Week?
I have a hard time with that, actually, because, my boyfriend and I were 13 years apart, so he'll be retired years before I will be. So it's kind of like, okay, when we get to that point in our lives, what's that going to be like? I can't quite picture it. I'm saving up for retirement. I have that covered, but I just can't picture it right now. I have no idea.
And
he wants to travel. I know I want to travel too, but other than that, I don't know.
It's the great unknown.
It
Exactly.
is.
I do that all the time. We started this conversation. I just got back from Vegas. There's a lot of older people in the casinos in Vegas. That's what they're doing with their time. They're traveling. They're doing the things that I want to do. But I can't help but look at an older couple walk by and stop and think, so is that me? Is that us? Is that what I look like? Is that,
And it's funny you should say that. We actually met some of our neighbors the other day who were, honest to goodness, the older version of us.
Yeah.
They were retired us. We're like, okay, I think this is where we're going. And,
This is
and
like the
they're
Notebook,
traveling.
your version of the Notebook.
Yeah, they hop into their RV and they travel
Oh,
to
I
the
would
States.
love to do that.
And they don't map it out. They don't
Yeah.
book rooms or anything ahead
Right.
of time. If they make a wrong turn, they just go with it.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah,
Like, that
because
is-
you
Oh, that sounds
can.
great.
That's going to be us.
It sounds to me, Andrew, like you want to just fast forward 15 years right now. You
That's
just want
just
to. You
it.
just
I-
want to get
You're
there.
right.
Exactly. I'm not scared of retirement at all. I really would like to get to it. But yeah, I want to mention before we run out of time, and I'll make this easy for the listeners, they should Google Bill 5, Alberta Ledge Bill 5. It's a really interesting bill. It's among the 24 that got passed by the NDP government in this spring session. And what it is, it affects an estimated 146,000 households. And what it will do for you is it provides money, I think up to $40,000 per household, to upgrade your house to allow for a senior to stay in the home. And so it's there, it's available, but I think maybe a lot of seniors, because it didn't get a lot of press. And the reason it didn't get a lot of press is because all parties agreed with it. So when there's no argument, there's no conversation. But people should Google Bill 5, Alberta Ledge, see if you qualify, and then take a look. And it has to do with, fixing doors and windows and putting in ramps and whatever else you would need to stay in your home.
An
to
example
know.
of how government policy needs to respect the generation that,
Exactly.
let's be honest, built this province. Thanks for listening to The Announcers. You can listen to Steph Hansen through middays on Kiss and Country 103.9. It's been so much fun to hang out with you.
Thank you so much for
Thanks for
having me. This is
joining us.
great.
Of
Thank
course,
you.
Andrew Gross, Jalen Nye on the air on 6:30 CHED from 2 to 6. I'm on from 9 to noon. You've been watching or listening to The Announcers.